Sherry Overdorf, and joining me today is Professor Ron Wheeler. We're going to be discussing the topic of pain and suffering and hopefully answering some questions that we all unfortunately have to face in our lives. I wanted to begin by asking you first about a quote that you made in one of your lectures. You declared that to be human is to suffer. Why must we as human beings suffer?
As a human being, we are always under change. And change provides the opportunity for suffering to take place. For example, when we grow up, as our bodies change biologically, that brings about certain areas of change. When we are interacting with other people, the sociological dynamic of just being human brings us into contact with different kinds of people. And even psychologically, the way that we think about the world, the way that we experience our lives, bring about a chance of change.
As human beings, can we really become familiar with the idea of suffering?
Yes, I think so, because familiarity grows out of experience. And if we think of experience on a very fundamental level, most of us start off life as I want. In a very simple way, I want something to eat, or I want something to drink. Now this progresses to ambition, and it can also progress then to intimacy. Ambition, I want that job. Intimacy, I want that mate. And so those two areas, especially when they come in conflict with other people's desire, brings about suffering.
As far as physical pain and suffering, in hospitals and care facilities, they use a scale of pain with the happy and sad frowns on it, the Wong-Baker scale of pain. And I know that you have a perception of what somebody goes through as they kind of take a ride on that scale of pain. Can you explain a little bit about those perceptions?
What is the difference really between a 9 and a 10 on a scale of pain? I had never thought too much about that or thought about how I would distinguish it. But when I went into the hospital with a bad appendix, and then when the appendix burst, I had a whole new revelation. Number 9 is you think you're going to die, where number 10 is you think you're not going to die.
Do you believe, Professor Wheeler, that suffering somehow has a purpose?
It depends upon what question it finally leads us to ask. If the suffering leads us to ask the question, what next? Then that suffering or even pain provides us with a very important function. But most of us, when we are suffering or when we have difficulties, what we really want to ask first is the question, why? Why am I suffering? Or where did this come from? And we tend to look backwards, where most pain on a very fundamental level is made to make us look forward and to take an action.
How do you think this new perspective should affect a person's attitude toward their own pain and suffering?
If we live with the why question only, of course sometimes you need to know why before you can take action, but we don't always get that answer of why, especially in terms of emotional pain. If, however, we allow ourselves to say, I am in pain, I am suffering, what do I need to do? What steps can I take to address this issue?
How can we effectively help somebody near to us, a friend, a family member, who is experiencing a high level of suffering and pain?
Most of us feel very uncomfortable when we have someone close to us or even acquaintance that is suffering. First of all, we don't know what to say. Next, we don't know what to do. I've been helped probably most with a book called Where is God When It Hurts? It's by Philip Yancey. Yancey talks about 4 frontiers of managing suffering. These frontiers are fear, helplessness, meaning, and hope. And in the book, he describes how we as non-sufferers can engage our suffering friends on those 4 levels. But to sum it up in short, I think presence, being with someone, showing up, helps protect those who suffer from one of the most excruciating parts of suffering, and that's isolation. The feeling that we are really all alone. And with that development of rapport, we don't have to, as a non-sufferer, answer the suffering questions. But being with someone who is suffering is very helpful.
Let's discuss a little bit more about just the global idea of suffering. Would you agree with me that sometimes it seems as though suffering is just, and sometimes it seems it just comes out of nowhere and seems to have it's just very unjust?
Yes, I think we can consider the problem of pain into two distinct categories. We live in a cause and effect universe. Certain actions bring about certain results.
Right.
Cause, effect. If I am irresponsible, if I drink and drive and I crash my car, we might say that whatever suffering happens to me is just suffering. However, because we live in a world where people have independent choices from one another, often unjust suffering does take place. If I drink and drive and I run into a car that has a family and I do bodily harm to that family, that's unjust for them to suffer.
Could you share a bit about the part that suffering has played and pain has played maybe in your own life?
Well, on a personal level, my father fell downstairs when I was a young adult, and he was in a nursing home for 12 years. And watching his suffering was very instructive to me, and also in some senses very painful. My wife's health is also a point of challenge for me individually, because certain aspects of her debilitation are simply in the gene pool, as we might say.
Right.
They were not her control. She did not do anything to deserve what she suffers physiologically. Sometimes I get frustrated with conditions of organizations that I have worked with. I volunteer quite a bit in certain organizations, and watching people jockey for position, that can be something of a source of frustration and even anger and then suffering for me. So I don't speak as someone who is separated from the topic, but then I'm convinced that no one is ever separated from pain and suffering. Or to put it another way, it's never a matter of if we will suffer, it's only a matter of when. My own thinking about pain and suffering essentially comes from religious and literary sources, not so much biology. But even so, the Bible, for example, Genesis chapter 3, Luke, Ecclesiastes, and the book of Job. Also the Bhagavad Gita, which includes Buddhist thinking, the Tao Te Ching, which is a Taoist text, C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, his book The Problem of Pain, and also A Grief Observed have been very helpful. In addition, Philip Yancey and Dallas Willard, Philip Yancey's book Where is God When It Hurts, and Dallas Willard's The Spirit of the Disciplines, have proved to me some ideas of the community aspects of dealing with pain and suffering.
It's true that suffering is a human experience from which no one can flee. Perhaps how we view pain and how we deal with suffering can really make a difference in our lives, even between life and death. Who knows the purpose of pain and suffering? Maybe it's just to get us to remember who we are, where we came from, and where we're going. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Ron.